Meet Mike Wilson in Wales and me, Harmony Gates, in California in Mondays with Mike. Drop in on our wise, warm, spontaneous discussions where we explore the deep stuff of life, revealing the wisdom, insight, and truth that lives in us. Discover resources for living and sharing your fullest aliveness and for enhancing your capacity for safe, comfortable, emotionally connected relating. In this meandering interaction with Mike, he and I talk about mindfulness and focusing. And we talk about authentic expression. I describe how I found my voice and learned relationship dynamics through movement and dance. And we muse about how humans are intricately interconnected with each other and with all life, and not necessarily the separate, rugged individualists that some would have us believe. I hope you enjoy it. Hi.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
good. I'm still adjusting my machine here. There we go.
how are you?
Okay, I'm good. Thank you for letting me take a little extra time. I didn't really ask. I just said I was doing it. um, but it was really, really helpful. And I don't normally do that because I like to be punctual. And
Hmm?
um, let me just say, let me see what's here. So it was a big self-care item for me to ask for that time, for me to actually say, even though I have something scheduled with someone else, I'm going to take care of myself because I really need it.
Hmm. Good. Glad you were able to do that.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to ring a bell? Are you fully present? I'm here and I can just continue.
I'm here.
Okay. All right. So here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we don't really have a structure, but you did say you maybe wanted to talk about my response to your
Mm.
saying that the right brain, left brain wasn't something that you were. Uh, mm, well, what I remember is you saying, I think studies have discounted that. Sort of like I said something and then it felt discounting to me. I don't think
Mm.
exactly what you meant, and I was thinking this morning, if someone's giving me information about something that guides them, then it might be difficult for me to not say right up front, well, I'm not guided by that same thing. So we can't like travel together along that path because I'm not using that as a basis for how I make decisions
Mm.
or how I act. And so in that regard, I could fully understand now that I've processed it and thought about it this morning. I could fully understand, yeah, there could be a second option of just not mentioning, depending on if that person, not mentioning my point of view differing from theirs, or my, if they're just giving me information, then we're moving on to another subject. It's like if we don't have to actually sort of mm, have the knowledge that we agree on something and we both believe it in order to kind of move forward with some kind of process. So that's, yeah. And I appreciated, I felt sort of somehow validated or at least cared for in some way, because it was an emotional, it felt like an emotional impact when you just said into the room, oh, well, that's, basically that's bunk. It's kind of how I heard it. And then to have at least two people say, well, no, we've read that too. That isn't completely, we can't just write it off. There might be something there, So that's how it was for me.
Yeah, I wanted you to have a chance to talk about that because there's two sides to it. There's as Mickey says, there's the impact and there's the intention, and don't forget to acknowledge the impact, even if the intention was something else.
Yeah.
So there's how it landed for you
Yeah.
and what I was intending to say.
Right. Which is
not what I think isn't
yeah.
how it landed. What landed certainly wasn't what I intended. And
Yeah.
I think
So,
there was a misunderstanding of what I was saying, but I want to be sure that you get a chance to talk about the impact.
well, I really appreciate that. And now that I have, and I feel heard, I mean, you haven't reflected it, but you listened and you didn't give any pushback. And you've also said, yeah, it sounds like the impact was something I didn't intend. You didn't intend. So now you've heard that. And now I'm in the place where I'm curious, what was your intention?
I haven't read McGilchrist, and I'm honestly got so many other things I want to read. There's very little chance I will ever read him. I've watched an interview with him on a recording of an interview with him on YouTube.
Is he the one that they referred to? Because I haven't read him.
Yeah, that wrote the book. Yeah. The thing that I'm criticizing isn't necessarily what you said or anything to do with what you said. It's just that there's a general view in out in the wild that there's left brain and right brain. The left brain's full of all the logical sequential stuff, and the right brain's full of all the illogical, chaotic, creative stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's bollocks. And I think that has been shown to be bollocks.
Yeah.
And what McGilchrist is saying is it's far more nuanced than that.
Right.
And that there are different things happening on different sides of the brain, but it's far more nuanced than just saying the right brain is creative and the left brain is logical and sequential.
Right. Yeah. And I would agree with you there. And so so that's what you were maybe wanting to name is, have we just fallen into the right brain's over here and the left brain's over here and they do these things, and just wanted to, it sounds like what you wanted to do was caution against that kind of thinking, which has been improved. And so, floating that information in just to remind people that we can't black and white the brain.
Yeah. We still don't know that much about it, and we have some better ideas than we had, but we still don't know that much about it.
Right.
The interesting thing that I've read recently is that there's a general assumption. I don't know this has ever been claimed. Well, actually, yes, it has been claimed, because I've read somebody ought to know better, frankly. There's a general assumption that the brain is a kind of computer.
Yeah, that's a misconception.
And there's also, there's very clear evidence that isn't the case, and that we think of it as a kind of computer because that's the best model we have.
Right.
Victorians actually had diagrams and thought about the brain as a very sophisticated clockwork machine.
Right.
Because that's the best model they had.
Well, and they were in the mechanical modeling. Before that, people probably they ate the brain. They didn't even think the brain was important.
Yeah.
It's like there's all
ancient Greeks thought that the mind lived in the heart, in the center of the chest.
Right, exactly. So, and
So
the thing,
quite a while later.
I think what I was trying to present wasn't this black and white theory. And of course, I was perhaps oversimplifying in some way. Um, and yet I I found so much value when I studied with Sarah Payton, and she's a neurologist and a scientist. She isn't, you know, she studied with Panksepp and many others. And for me, there was a really important piece about how the emotions work in the brain,
Mm,
and how that the right brain more or less has this creative relational piece. The right brain sees us as part of everything and sees the world that way, sees us in relation that way. So it's always including all of that.
mm,
Whereas the left side of the brain, which is much more instrumental, um, actually sees um, us as separate from everything. We might say it that way. So
mm.
we're here and we have to do stuff to the world, or it's doing stuff to us, but it's not like it's more, it sees things. I don't even know if I can explain it exactly. The part that was significant to me is, and they work together. When the right brain doesn't have a lot of trauma and has developed properly, then they dance together. The right brain has an experience and the left brain names it and says, oh, you're afraid because blah blah blah, and the right brain goes, oh yeah, okay, now we can dance more. When the right brain has been traumatized and hasn't really sort of fully found ways to do like self comfort and calm, when something traumatic happens, especially if there isn't a person with us, then um, it doesn't know how to kind of reach over to the left brain. It just gives up, and the left brain says, oh, is it their fault or is it your fault? Like, is this something we
Mm.
have to fix? And so,
That's, I think, probably what I personally find more useful is to be aware that there are different qualities of mind, and precisely whereabouts in my brain they live
yeah,
is, I don't find that particularly useful,
that
because
makes
it's in there and I hope I never see it,
right, right.
but there's that sort of pink and grey stuff in there,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's yeah, is it the left, is it the right, is it, I mean, the front, the back?
Yeah, and it's confusing to try to, it can be confusing when we sort of have an idea, oh, it's something happening inside the brain, and then people try to name it. It's like, then you can find fault with what they name, right? Wait, but that's not true. And that, if we just say, well, yeah,
Mm.
you know, our mind,
Useful
our
to know
brain.
about it. You seen that thing that this comes from? Yeah, Dan. Forgotten
Millman,
his surname.
which
Hmm?
one? Dan Millman, is it him? There's so many people.
Yeah, it'll come back. It'll
It,
come to me in a minute. The psychiatrist. It's interesting. I mean, again, I don't really need to know where it is, but the older, the sort of the lizard brain, the older part, as we evolved and developed more powerful brains, we didn't replace that. We just added to it.
right. We layered on
So we
top of
still
it.
have that older, fast acting, but not highly intelligent
Right,
part, and that's interesting. But again, it's, I don't usually think in terms of that's, and yeah, and the neocortex. I don't imagine my intelligence sitting at the front and the
right,
getting angry very easily or
right,
spotting danger quickly. I don't imagine the whereabouts in my head there happening.
right. You just
But it,
have the
but it,
experience and then wonder
but
about
it's interesting to have that um, information about the different qualities of different ways that our minds can react, and the pretty well supported theory
it. Right,
that we're better at spotting danger than we are at spotting delight and comfort, because well, we evolved to survive, and spotting danger means we survive, means survival.
right. So it
So
explains, yeah,
those
it's,
in a sense, evolution doesn't care if we're happy or sad. It
I need
just
to be alive
cares that we
first
survive
and
to
then,
reproduce. Yeah.
you know, we're happy
So
that
even if we're
dead.
depressed and anxious, but we fuck each other and make babies,
Yeah, exactly.
evolution's
We
working.
live long enough to do that, right? So yeah, it's so nuanced, and it to me, it's easy, I think, to completely, like, especially this right brain or the left brain blame thing. It's easy to say, I blame myself because I'm not handling this well.
Hmm.
And understanding that, oh, I might not be handling this well because the side of my brain that should have learned how to handle that didn't have anybody with me when I was having all this trauma. And especially you've been talking about trauma. So,
Hmm.
so it needs to be helped to sort of reshape itself. And these are the elements that will help do that. And so now I have an action plan in a way, to do that, to shape it differently so that when things happen, I don't just think I'm defective. I have compassion and say, whoa,
Hmm.
that was traumatic. Yeah, somebody held my hand during it and they named it as traumatic. Now I can reset and sort of move on.
What I find, or what I've just from my own experience, that was the most useful was to change the language that I spoke to myself in, and which kind of changed the way I perceive things. So instead of saying I did that wrong, why was that, how can I do better, was to just to say that didn't go well and how did I contribute and what would I have preferred to have done and what would I do next time. So again, I'm speaking, and even without using the words, I'm just thinking about myself in that gentler, more compassionate way, just from learning MVC and learning and practicing MVC.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is a language change. And we see
Mm,
through the lens of language, different cultures, just a simple one that comes to mind is the word casa or home and, or house. And when we say my house in English, it usually means a structure,
mm,
right? A physical structure that maybe a family lives in or someone lives in. When you say casa, which means house, it really means home in Spanish. They don't really have a word for the structure. They're talking about the home. So
place where they live.
even our languages, break things up differently and give us different ways to perceive the world, really, and ourselves. So it's, yeah. So of course,
Yeah, so to begin with, I kind of practiced the language of MVC, and along the way, it changed the way I thought.
exactly.
But
Yeah,
I changed the way I acted first, and then
yeah,
allowed that to change the way I thought.
yeah. It's sort of like fake it till you
And
make it.
built, yeah,
Yeah,
precisely, built
yeah.
new circuits. And I
It's
sometimes still hear people who've been around MVC long enough to know better, still speaking textbook MVC. And I think, why are you speaking textbook MVC? You've been doing it longer than me. It doesn't sound, I get quite triggered by that. It doesn't sound authentic.
yeah. Well, and my immediate answer is it has to do with the other second subject, which is our um, I want to use the not the word personality. I want to use the other word that I like better, which is our. I almost have to read the email. It'll come, but it's almost like how open we
Temperament,
are. Pardon me, temperament. Yes, thank you. How open
that
we
was the
are.
email you sent this afternoon, today.
Yeah.
Mm,
How open we are versus how sort of organized we are. Like our brains prefer, and the very open. You're very open. I can tell that's one of our temperament traits that we both
yeah, I think that came across in the test that I did, which I think was quite similar to one that Jordan Peterson mentioned.
yeah.
I'm reluctant to spend $10 on his test or on his colleague's test.
Yeah, yeah. His test used to be free. When I took it, it was free, and then, but
Mm,
he started that way. But he also has to make a living like everyone else, and um, yeah, it starts with the big five, and then each one of those is divided into two, and it's quite nuanced. And I think he mentions in the video, and I don't have all this background, but he started with that big five, and then they worked and did a lot more sort of,
so it's a bit more than the big five.
yeah, it's more nuanced and I
Yeah,
think,
the big five that I did, just let me have a quick look at this because I can find this quickly because I've got it in my notebook.
sure, it'd be interesting for us.
Because they do break each of the big five down into several subcategories.
Oh, it might be the same even. I don't know for sure.
Big five test. Here we go. I can't remember how long it was. A while ago that I did it. I can't remember how many different questions there were. I can't remember how long it took. Yeah. So, for example, I got for neuroticism a score which is basically they say is low, but then they break that down into anxiety, anger, depression, self-consciousness, immoderation, and vulnerability.
Interesting.
And I don't do very well in anger or self-consciousness. I'm all right for anxiety, depression, and immoderation, but
Yeah,
anger and self-consciousness, oh dear, likely to get grumpy if things don't go my way.
yeah, yeah. I got that one too. Irritation levels can happen
Yeah.
fast. Yeah, yeah.
So I can get cross with if the drawer gets jammed because I've put too many things in the drawer. And I sometimes stop myself to myself, I'm getting angry with an inanimate object. What's the point of this? I'm
Yeah,
angry because there's a pair of scissors wedged across the drawer and it won't open.
exactly. Yeah, you think, well,
And what fool put too many things in the drawer in the first place?
exactly. Yeah, laugh about that. I know, and
Mm,
and there's times when I'm more resilient. I think there's more obviously going on, but
mm.
it's, the same thing. Sometimes it has to do with, okay, that didn't work, that didn't work, that didn't work. On the fifth one, I'm like, ah, it's like, enough, I can't take it. It just becomes, over the top. Life just sucks and nothing works, and there's kind
Yeah,
of an immediate.
the universe is against me.
But I recover fast. That's the other piece. I recover pretty fast once I have a little.
The coat hangers are against me.
I
I
think
only
that.
want one and the whole bloody lot hanging on to each other.
Oh yeah, I have an Irish temper. I think that's the way I was learned it. Is like
Mm,
quick and but then over.
yeah.
So yeah, yeah. I ended up. I was looking for my results. I thought I had made a whole document because they uh, Jordan's test gave a printout of sorts, and of course,
Yeah. Oh, sure.
just one more frustration level. When I search for it on my computer, I can't find it.
Mm,
My biggest source of
it's in
frustration.
there somewhere.
Oh, yeah, yeah, but I don't remember what I called it, and my brain does not work like a computer. That's how I know our minds and brains are not computers. Even with
Mm.
all the ways they've made Windows and made it easier. I'm sorry, I need physical stuff. I find this paper, I stack it somewhere, I find it, it's there.
I kind of know what you mean. There's something sometimes about physical stuff. I have a Kindle
Mhm.
and I read quite a few books on my Kindle. They're often a lot cheaper than buying the physical things.
Yeah,
But
usually,
sometimes there's something I want to read and I think I really want that in a proper book.
yeah.
I mean, I know that this is completely out of character, but I suddenly had this urge to know more about witchcraft.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And I had this, it looked so lovely. I thought I've got to get the hard book. This arrived yesterday. It's delightful.
Oh, good for you. Yeah.
I think I'm a green witch. I think I'm going to be a green witch.
I have no idea. You'll have to tell me in one of our meetings what a green witch even is. Is that with plants or is it something completely different?
A green witch is, well, I don't like the language that she uses. For me, a green witch is a witch that has a good relationship with the other than human world.
Okay. And nature spirits, whatever,
What
something
what
like
people would normally call nature, and I would prefer to not call it nature because it kind of implies that being human isn't natural.
that. Yeah, exactly. It separates us. That's nature.
Yeah,
What are we? Right. Unless I think
so
of it.
yeah, it would involve not. It tends to be. I mean, there are. I hadn't realised until the weekend when I started reading. There are a lot of different schools of witchcraft, and there are covens which are all where everybody practicing in that coven is going to be practicing something fairly similar. And there are solitary witches, and green witches tend to be solitary and tend to follow their own path, so that it's less prescribed.
Hmm. Mm.
And there's no, some of them, particularly the more conventional ones, will also be Wicca, because there's a difference between being a witch and observing Wicca, the religion of Wicca.
Wow.
And so
I have not delved into any of that. So
it's fascinating. I'm fascinated by it.
I think, you know, it is interesting. And
Big in America.
pardon me?
It's big. There's big, witchcraft's big in America. Wicca is big in America. There's loads of covens, loads of practicing witches.
Yeah, I find it shows up in women's groups where I
Mm,
think I'm in a women's group, but it has, you know, a witchcraft or some kind of element that I'm not pursuing. So,
mm.
um, and again, it may just be kind of a language thing because, you know, um, even at some kind of core place, all the religions are kind of saying the same thing, as far as I'm concerned. You know, but once you dogmatize them and you have these languages, then you can say, oh no, that's not it, it's this, right?
Mm.
And so maybe, yeah, for some reason that hasn't been. I started with meditation when I was 17, and a kind of a more Eastern uh, uh, Tao Te Ching and Alan Watts, and kind of where East meets West.
I
So
read Alan
yeah,
Watts' biography 30 years ago when I was
Alan
in
Watts.
therapy. The therapist lent me, I think was it called In My Own Way?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
And I read it, and I gave it back to the therapist afterwards, and he said, and we talked about it. I said I enjoyed it. He was an interesting bloke, and he said, well, what he doesn't mention is that he was an alcoholic. He drank himself to death.
Ah, yeah, I didn't know that either.
No, I was a bit stunned.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that leads me to another path that I don't know if I want to bring it up here exactly, but it's fascinating to me when I was studying with Sarah Hayton, and she's talking about Panksepp, who is another scientist who found these brain circuits. Like there's a let me get my notes. Hang on one second. I've been writing this right here. It's right in front of me. Um, I just wrote it down on this page.
There we are. I had to go because you popped away. I had to go and check that. It's Dr. Dan Siegel. He's the guy that came up with
Oh,
that
Siegel.
model of the.
Right, right.
He's the
So,
guy who does the meditation course that I've sort of been wondering about.
oh, right, the trauma one, the trauma-based meditation course. Is that the one?
Not specifically trauma, but it does include. I think he doesn't say it heals trauma. He says that it allows us to live with it and have it have less effect on us. It's almost like it shrinks it, or it shrinks the significance or the effect that it's still having on us.
Yeah. So we can sort of manage it in a way. It never goes
Mm,
totally away. That's my experience too, is these potent experiences that we've had that go deep. The point isn't to actually rid ourselves. We never can. It's almost like a tree that gets struck by lightning and then grows around it, and it just manages to grow still healthy
mm.
instead of die from it. Kind of, that's a kind of a gross metaphor, but something like that. We learn how to know and recognize and function, sort of including the trauma, but not um, sort of resisting it when it comes up. Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. And that for
I
me is
think part of it.
gentleness.
Go on.
Well, there's a gentleness there. It's like, as I understand,
Mm,
oh, of course I act this way because I had this thing happen, rather than, oh no, something's wrong with me. Why can't I? You know, it's just keep like giving compassion in a way to myself for the larger and then shrinkingly more remnant bits of reactivity, or frozenness, or however it affects my behavior. And understanding, I think, really helps. And I don't know what his work is in terms of meditation. Um,
he teaches something that is very like mindfulness. So I think it's basically
yeah.
mindfulness without any of the baggage. So it's very similar to some of the Buddhist practices. But
Uh,
he's got the next step. He begins with something like or watching the breath, mindfulness of breathing.
mm-hmm.
But he goes on to the wheel of awareness, and I don't know what that is yet. It's a more advanced practice. I'm working my way through his book, and I'm just practicing a couple of times a day, quite briefly at the moment, practicing his first exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll try the next exercise when I get to it in the book.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds fruitful. I have found over the years that when I can find a practice, and I need more than one because I'm so open and I love novelty. A practice works
Mm,
for a while and then I need to shift. It just stops working because it's too easily turned into, like, I don't know, I can fall asleep during a practice that took a lot of
mm,
attention initially. Um, but the practices, especially that anything that can bring me into the present moment, into my right now awareness, where I'm fine,
mm.
is useful. Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's something I practiced anyway, because I practiced out walking in the
Exactly.
countryside.
So you're
Did I
walking.
tell you about my experience with the monk?
Yeah. Oh, no. Sorry, that was so
Um,
fast. It just went. Yeah. I just.
yeah, this would have been 2 or 3 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a Tibetan Buddhist who escaped from Tibet over the mountains, which is very dangerous because if they get caught by the Chinese soldiers, they get beaten up or even beaten to death
Yeah.
or shot. But they escaped. He got to Nepal and eventually ended up in Cardiff, of all places, in the UK, in Wales, in the UK.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then he did singing bowl meditations. He had this huge collection of some big brass bowls, some of them this big. And we sat in the room. There were probably 25, 30 people.
Yeah.
And he went around the room and asked us each about our meditation practice. And I said, I don't really have a formal practice. But I do like to, when I'm out walking on the beach, in the countryside, in the woods, whatever, to just for one breath, to just try and be present to where I am. And he went round the room and asked different people, and there were some serious meditators there. People that do half an hour twice a day. People that do Vipassana all day. It's their
Yeah.
holidays to go away and do
And maybe
Vipassana
a
all day
row.
for
Right.
2 weeks. And after he finished, he went around the room and he pointed to me and he said, "Our friend here understands meditation."
I bet that felt good. Yeah. It's
And I
not
did, and I went,
something. Yeah. Yeah. Not just on the cushion. That's something different. If it's, to me, the formal practice is, it gives us a really good experience, but it doesn't necessarily wake us up in general in this kind of way where as we function, we are um, separate from the cushion practice. We are awake in this way.
mm.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
So
that's,
it's becoming present to in the place, and that's part of what kind of what Dan Siegel's saying, that is to separate the experience of having awareness with what we're aware of. So it's the separating the thinking and the remembering,
mm-hmm,
memories and the thoughts from that part of us that is doing the remembering and the thinking. And I think that in parts is part of what his treatment for trauma, these experiences, is
right.
to notice that sits out there on the what I think he calls the rim of the wheel, and in the
Oh,
center, the hub is that awareness, that
awareness.
consciousness, the
Yeah.
part of us that thinks.
And I like to call that part in the center the witness.
Mm,
It
yes,
isn't
I've heard it called that.
any of the things it's looking at. It's able to just, like, it has this uh, non-judgmental center of everything, witness kind of presence. And
Observing without evaluating.
exactly, without
Mm,
judging, evaluating, or creating a story or interpreting, it just sees and and just, oh, how
this is what
interesting,
is.
how interesting. That's it.
Mm,
Not interesting for a purpose, or just, it just, this calm witness. That's, at some level for me, that's what also allows me to just laugh at stuff that normally, because I see through it. It's just like, oh yeah.
I had you reminded me of something that happened a few years ago now, because I was MVC certification candidate for a couple of years.
Yes.
And I think on the day I spoke to an assessor who agreed to take me on as a candidate, and we met on Zoom because that's a problem in the UK. People are, particularly where I live in Wales, people are spread out. Everyone's a long way away.
Right.
And so basically, I was there. I'm settled. I've been accepted. I'm a certification candidate. I went to my practice group and got in a huge shouty row with somebody else in the practice group. And afterwards, I just thought that's just hilarious. So I wasn't beating myself up or telling myself I'm going to fail as an MVC trainer. I'm not fit
Right.
for any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So this is so fucking funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Just
Mm.
you're entering this practice that's supposed to
Yeah.
keep you centered
Having
and
quite got the
calm
hang
and
of it, yeah.
compassionate. Well, then
So
you're
yeah, I'm
you're low in
practicing a lot.
neuroticism. You're low in neuroticism based on that, because someone that's high in the kind of anxiety about how they're functioning would just freak out over that. So it saved you. And that's
But yeah, there are people like that, and I occasionally meet them, particularly. I don't know quite where the overlap comes, but in the west of England, there's a heck of a lot of Buddhists who are also MVC practitioners,
interesting.
and they always seem very tightly wound to me. So they're trying really hard to be good Buddhists and to be good MVC people, and I think one of these days they're going to explode. And again, it lacks authenticity. When I blow up and lose my rag and shout at someone, it's me being very authentic.
Right. Yeah.
And I value authenticity very highly.
Yeah. And directness and authenticity. Yes.
I
Yeah.
prefer if I didn't blow up and shout at people. It doesn't happen very often. It's probably happened twice in the last 10 years.
Right.
So
But
it's
you
a
give
pretty
yourself,
unusual thing.
it's like you give yourself permission to have all of yourself and not like put parts of it in
Yeah.
the box. Right. Yeah.
And then I say, okay, that part of me is there, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't.
Yeah. It makes
I
sense.
have the capacity to lose my shit in a big way. And at least I never thumped anybody. I haven't thumped anybody since I left school, which is so the
That's saying a
physical
lot.
violence isn't there in me, I don't think.
That's saying a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Come close, but I haven't done it. Even when I was married, I can remember being utterly consumed by rage with my ex-wife. I was completely overcome, like a completely. It's called emotional hijacking, isn't it? In the
Yeah.
the language of emotion, the guy who invented emotional intelligence calls it hijacking. When basically 100% of the mind is occupied by an emotion,
Yeah.
typically anger.
Yeah. You become the emotion.
And I can remember, and then afterwards thinking, I'm really glad I didn't even cross my mind that I would hit her.
Right. That wasn't part of the way you were raised, because if it was connected to your rage circuit, that's one of the circuits, by the way, is rage. And did you see that growing up, and it was like part of you would have just, that's just would have come along with
It's interesting because my mother would lose her shit and hit us when we were kids.
Yeah. Well, so what do I know? Not much. I don't hit people.
But I didn't.
But you're also male,
that behavior.
and you might have internalized that as you're male, and you might have internalized that men shouldn't hit anybody.
It's a woman thing.
Yeah, perhaps.
Because
yeah.
If my father hit me, it was very cold and calculated, and it was like he didn't lash out in anger.
Right.
He said, "You're going to get a smack for this."
You're getting a lesson, and versus like
After he told me why, so he didn't do it in temper. It was my mother that had the temper.
Yeah, I had a mother that had that kind of temper also. And she was also, as I know now, very left alone as a child, and didn't really have an anchoring adult. She at 2 years old, she was moved between different families because her mother was put in the hospital and her father was alcoholic, so Irish alcoholic. So she
It's a terrible start to life, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. And so she, of course, did her best. I have to thank her for my great sense of humor and my ability to storytell and all these things. I didn't ever got a chance growing up because she was so big that everyone else had to be small, or at least I did.
Mm.
But it's here and it's finally coming. I finally have found enough safety to start to express some of that with my voice, especially. Uh,
So that part of you is coming through, your
yeah,
voice and your dance, of course.
yeah. The dance has been my way to. It's such an interesting thing about the dance because that's been my way to heal relational dynamics. Because with words being shut down inside me and anxiety, high in neurotics, like, how do I be with you? Sorry, my phone is, I can't believe it. I usually just turn it off. And now the message won't, oh, there we go. Okay. Um, yeah, I was completely, I think I was an extrovert, but very introverted in order to get along and in order to stay safe. And, and so even talking, which is, takes face to face eye
Oh,
contact. Do you have to run? What's happening?
no, I lost you for a couple of seconds there.
Oh,
One of us is having a bad internet day.
or moment.
Yeah, I know you're back now. That's what, yeah, yours has gone red, which normally means that it's saying your internet is unstable.
It's not
But anyway,
uncommon.
you're back.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Um, well, let me just say that as a very introverted extrovert, I think my energy is very much extrovert, and
Mm,
open and social. Um, but I was traumatized in that way for so long. And so I couldn't really just be with people and talk and have eye contact. That was just terrifying in some way. And so I learned how to communicate by body touch and this contact dance, not the one with music where everybody's far apart, but I learned this. You lean into somebody and they lean into you, and then you start to sort of let gravity and just what your body can do move you both. And so I didn't have to make eye contact. I didn't have to use words. I could learn, oh, this is energy that I can respond to. And we have this kind of mutual dialogue that happens that we allow
mm.
to express and continue. Yeah.
It's a different language.
Yeah. Completely. And finding the relief in that and some sense of my own voice, even if it was just my body. I had my voice through movement. Yeah. That was a really important step for me. Stage or step in,
Mm.
uh, yeah, learning how to share space comfortably and dialogue with someone or groups. I'm still working with it, but that's was a
Mm.
major piece of the puzzle for me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. She left a message. Devices. I still didn't turn it into sleep here. Okay, there we go.
Have you written a vision?
Yes, I have written a vision and shared it. I think I even sent you something that was a link, but
Oh,
maybe
I've probably
not.
seen it then and forgotten about it. Okay, the reason it was back on my mind because Vicky mentioned it on Friday,
Ah,
and she said something that had me thinking, and so it's kept me busy. She said, "Vision is the energy source of liberation." I thought, oh, okay. It's more important. I realised it was important. It's more important. It's more important than that. I've gone back. I'm going back to mine.
okay. Yeah.
I've got a head full of ideas, and I've written some down, but it's not been turned into a vision yet.
Hmm. My vision is pretty general, but it has totally to do with what we've just been talking about for me in terms of relating and people. Um, I don't remember what I wrote. I'd have to pull the document up, and that's too hard for me to do right now and stay focused with you. I can't do both
Mm,
at the same time. But it has to do with people feeling comfortable and getting along and having, um, trusting that they belong and that they matter and that there's this kind of flow that happens among people, as opposed to this sort of competitive me versus you, and this kind of again, it's almost right brain, left brain, like I was talking about in our group. This is, that we're relational. We come in. My vision is that we know we're relational with everything and with each other. So I can't really do bad things to you, because it means I'm doing bad things to myself in a very, not an intellectual way, in a very felt way. And then that's the way for progress to happen.
Really being in that sense of being part of a larger whole,
Yeah,
not
exactly.
a rugged individual,
Right.
fully independent individual.
Yes.
That's kind of touches on what would be in my vision when it's written.
Hmm. Yeah. I think we have some similar.
Which, yeah, it'll be something quite similar and also how we relate to each other and how we relate to the earth
Yeah.
and the other than human world.
Right.
So we
And
see ourselves as
is
parts of that
anything
system.
is anything really other than human? I mean, yes and no. We are only here because we're part of the whole world. We this is what I like Alan Watts. We emerged and are part of, our evolution comes up out of what's happening and what is nature on the whole planet. And so, we this weird moment where we separated ourselves and said, oh, you know, it's here to serve us.
Mm.
It's
That's the Old Testament thing about God gave man dominion over
right,
everything else, and
right.
suddenly it's not a system we're part of. It's
And
It's
then
more like it becomes our farm.
the native view is we're shepherds, not dominion over, but we're
Mm.
caretakers, right? And it's like that difference. If we're caring for because we depend on it, and it, then it becomes a whole other mindset.
It's the only home we've got. We
Yeah.
depend on it. Our descendants depend on it.
And there's a line, because you are, I am, which means it's like I can't be a person without other people. There's just no way that humans are separate from each other even. And uh and the interesting thing that just popped in my mind is that we separate from ourselves. We make our own what do I want to call it? Our own self-image, something rather than that comes up out of us like, oh, I see, I'm this. Instead, it's like, what do they think I am? And that's how I see myself, from this place of having been judged usually, rather than loved and accepted and warmly, understood. It's like, uh-oh, that's what I think self-consciousness is. It's this cultural tendency to, instead of being the center of ourselves from our heart, we're the object of our own perception.
Mm.
And then we're, constantly like looking at ourselves from an exterior point of view that is usually judgmental, shaming, blaming,
Mm.
finding inadequacy. Yeah,
So constructing our sense of self from what we believe other people think of us.
exactly.
Ugh.
Yeah.
God, that sounds horrible, doesn't it?
Ah,
Put it like that. Good, dear God. Oh.
yeah.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Yeah. Mm. And no wonder we have all this cultural conditioning that
Mm.
absolutely tells us to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at how all our institutions, schools, they line up, you sit at a desk, all of it, how you, the, that, yeah, that's all I need to say.
Yeah, it's basically a constant stream of messages about what's wrong with us,
Right. And how we need to
which we
perform for someone else in order to be safe and okay.
and those messages about what's wrong with us that we typically end up internalizing. So
Exactly.
we end up not needing another person to tell us how awful we are for us to know how awful we are because we tell it out to ourselves.
Yep. It becomes our own internal messaging. Yeah.
From, I've still got the book somewhere. I haven't got it to hand. I can't remember what it was called. It's the guy who came up with the inner child work.
You're better at remembering names.
No, I've completely forgotten that one.
Well, I still think you're better at remembering names than I am. I remember sort of the theories and then they all blend. Yeah. But yeah, this is what this is the same thing with the trauma. The inner child is always with us. There's no way that
Mm,
we become something other than it's almost like that's at the core and then we layer things. We keep building out like a tree, it starts small as a seedling, but the seed, all the energy and information in the seed is in the whole tree. It doesn't like it leaves seed and becomes tree. It just transforms, but it keeps that essence. And so that's that's who we are, the sum of everything that we've experienced. And when we're malleable, because we can change perspective sometimes. This is what I think healing the past is. We have a judgment about it before we even have all the information, or maybe just fear and blockage. And then sometime later, we have new information, or we're more mature and more able, and now we can look back and it means something different. And that changes our paths.
mm. Yeah, that's something else I've come across recently. That idea that it's about the story we tell ourselves about the past, and we can
Yeah,
change the story. We
yeah,
can't change what happened, but we can change the story.
right. But we need to be aware because the story is so subconscious. It just runs on its own
Mm,
pathway. And when we bring awareness and go, oh, what is that? And then we allow ourselves to see, feel, experience. There's something that's deep. For me, I can't do it by analyzing. It's more like opening to, I'm uncomfortable right now, let's say, and what just happened, and I'm still feeling it, and I'm still feeling it. And then somehow at some point, rather than resisting it, I sit with it. I just sort of, oh, this is my experience. That then calms me. And then in that spaciousness afterwards, if I stay with myself, here comes the information. Oh, that was this. Oh, that's that. Oh, this is how it fits. This is the new place now, the transformation. And it comes from within, from some part of some wisdom that becomes available when I almost just take time to be with. It's almost as simple as that, although often we need a companion or something, because if it's super overwhelming, then
mm.
our psyche won't even let us go there.
Yeah, yeah. There's the potential to discover something really uncomfortable, isn't there?
Yeah. And if we're all alone and it was uncomfortable initially and it's now uncomfortable and we still don't know, it's too much. So it's like, this is what Sarah Payton informed me, and I can't thank her enough, of this. One of the circuits that we have, I guess it's maybe a combination. I couldn't even do it from the circuit chart, but so we have this thing that's called alarmed aloneness.
Oh, I've heard that phrase before.
And so it's like,
Can't remember what it is.
here comes the alarm, and it's because we're alone. We're in alarm and we're alone. And it's a whole layer of unmet need, huge unmet need.
Mm.
And then our nervous system is, is
Re-traumatized.
yeah, yeah. And people can have alarmed aloneness from something in their past their whole life. The nervous system is always sort of a little or a lot, activated that way. And I believe I've had that for years, because now I've had a chronic physical health condition that I've tried everything for, nothing really worked. And as I've learned to calm my nervous system and be with myself, because initially we want another, you think of an infant crying, 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 and nobody comes. That's alarmed aloneness. It doesn't know what it needs. It's, it's activated. But if an adult or a care person, it even holds it, its body gets the message that it's not alone. And if that caregiver doesn't also just get as alarmed as the child, which, but has like a regulated, calmer place, holds the child learns that it isn't alone, that it can handle these things. And then it gets internalized. This is this right brain. The right brain then realizes later on, when there isn't an infant or an adult, oh, I'm alarmed, I'm alone. Oh, there's a part of the brain that says, no, you're not alone. We're with you. And then the nervous system can relax then and see what's up.
Well, we covered some ground today. It's 25 past.
Yeah, we're just at the witching hour, the green witching hour.
I'm just looking at this clock. I've made just across there. I made a clock, a digital clock, a few weeks ago, and it was a bit bright.
Yeah.
So I had to turn it off at night. And so I made another one, which is red. And I thought, because it's red, it won't be as bright. It's actually even brighter.
Oh no.
So sitting on the table across there, it looks like the table's on fire. This is bright red. It's reflecting onto the table.
Well,
and I don't think the display, I think the display is either on or off. I don't think there's any choice about how bright it is.
So I have a creative mind. Are you open to a suggestion?
Sure.
What I did with my computer screen, it's somewhat effective, is I took a piece of film that's supposed to go on car windows so that you can't see inside, and I put it on the front, and maybe
use the brightness a bit.
Right on the face of that clock, just to tone it down a bit.
It's a possibility.
Might work. Might be easier than trying to make it green.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what I've got. Several possibilities. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet.
Yeah, another project.
Yeah, I've got a choice of about 5 different microcontrollers, so I've got several different ways I could progress from here.
When you get it figured out, you can send me one. Or not. It's just a joke. But I didn't know that you did electronics that way, so that's a new little piece I just found out about you.
So another little thing I do on the side.
Yeah, one of your hobbies.
Shall we sort of check out, just make sure that we're complete?
Yeah.
So we're not leaving anything dangling or stopping too suddenly.
That sounds perfect.
think I'm celebrating openness, actually.
Mm,
That's what comes to mind from
mm,
the call, from the variety, and from the
mm.
willingness to go to the slightly uncomfortable experience of.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm leaving with. Yeah, just that little celebration of openness, willingness.
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
so let me
complete.
pause. Let me thank you. And let me pause and see where I am. Mm. Mm. Oh, so mine is just an addendum. It's heart openness.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like it's been a heart connection because mine was
Yeah.
open. There's a heart, connection. Something like that. That's trying to put it in words that I don't really have, but my mind moves fast. And
Mm.
it's been a delight. Thank you. Wait, where are you? There you are.
Okay. Are we complete? I
Yes,
think it looks like we
there we're
are.
complete. See you next
There
time.
we are. We're complete.
Hoorah.
Mm.
Thank you for spending this time with us. If you liked this podcast, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel to stay with us. And tell us what you thought of this episode. We love to read your thoughts in the comments section.